Go.
Stowe, you started blogging in 1999. The same year, you wrote the seminal Darwin magazine article making the case for social tools. How did you get into this in 1999?
Actually, it was interesting. It was the last issue before Darwin. Actually, it was the last issue of my newsletter. I was writing an electronic newsletter called Message. Actually, I took the name back from my blog, and I had stumbled into an application that really sort of perplexed me. I mean, it was really doing something very different. It was so different that I started to use the term social tools, and I made the case that this was really unlike things I had seen before that were supposed to be about more efficient communication, higher collaborative results from groups working, better number crunching, whatever. It really was an attempt. This particular tool was called A Buzz by a company called Beehive, and it was really an attempt to change the culture inside of a business explicitly. And so I said, that's different. And so that's when I started to be extremely interested in the potential impacts of that. And so I've been doing it ever since, almost 10 years. And A Buzz Beehive actually was acquired by the New York Times while I wrote that last issue of my newsletter, and kind of disappeared from view, actually. It's too bad, because it was a very innovative idea. Very Twitter-esque, actually. Years ahead of its time.
So with that backdrop, and you mentioned it's 10 years on, so what's interesting you today as you look around? Is adoption of social tools happening as fast in ways you imagine, or if not, why not?
Well, it's interesting. When I remember that first issue, the last issue of my newsletter, the first one I started talking about social tools, I knew I was onto something, because about 25% of my readers thought I was crazy, literally. I got those emails from people, it's like, stop sending me this, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. So I'd say that in this almost 10 years now, the social revolution has definitely proven itself out. The rise of social computing or social tools, rise of social networks, the kinds of things I was talking about even in 2000, 2001. Somewhere around that time I said, in the future all e-commerce will be socialized. And we're starting to see that happen. So that, for example, the travel sites now that are, you're picking where you should stay when you're traveling in Paris based on the recommendations of friends or people like you, is exactly that kind of shift that I anticipated, and it's really started to happen. I mean, it's very profound. Netflix Friends is a great example. I mean, you're getting informed about your choices of what movies to watch based on what your friends like. So we're seeing that. It's like sort of wholesale. I mean, that's an amazing shift in only a decade. The social revolution hasn't really trickled all the way out. We've only seen the first parts of it, but it's been an amazingly quick response. So the impact of things like Facebook, MySpace, in the big, what people call the consumer side of things, that is the personal individual side, has been really, really profound. And we're just starting to see the first indications of what might happen when these things start to move into the enterprise.
Okay, so the audience for Inside Knowledge is people in the world of facilitating knowledge, trying to create value for knowledge within their organization. So for those folks, what's your best words of advice? What are you seeing that's ahead as the impact of the social revolution, as you described it, in the consumer space, and we're seeing it here at this conference, that it does find its way into enterprise tools, and what do they need to know?
I think it's Lee Bryant, who's a friend of mine. He's actually here at the conference. He once said that when you switch to bottom-up approaches, everything has to be bottom-up, or it won't work. So it's very difficult to have little pockets of bottom-up thinking in business. So there's a real difficulty, a real tension, potentially conflict between a lot of the thinking of Web 2.0 social apps and how businesses are currently constructed, how they're structured to do what they do today. So I anticipate the impact of the social revolution on business is going to be as consequential as the re-engineering era was that we had in the 90s, where people fundamentally deployed email across the board, and it led to a complete reduction of most big companies. 2 or 3 or 4 levels of management disappeared in less than 7 or 8 years. I mean, it was an amazingly fast thing. When you put in new communication media, like in this case email, the balance of power shifts because people now communicate differently. And so everyone was doing end runs around middle management, and so they decided middle management was unnecessary, or at least to the degree they had it. We're going to see a similar impact of social media. When you bring social media in, you're creating a many-to-many, person-to-person communication and relationship matrix, and it's going to skirt the current model that we have in business today, which is still largely top-down management. So we'll see what happens, but my prediction is that there'll be a great hollowing out of companies, and we'll have less centralized control and more distributed decision making in the hands of the edgelings, the people at the edge who are actually doing all the work. So it's going to be a profound shift, because we're going to be moving away from the degree of authoritarianism we have in the businesses will be dramatically shifted. Now, don't get me wrong, this might take 10, 15, 20 years for us to see it in its fullest impacts, but it could be significantly faster than that. So it's going to be really consequential. It's not going to be small.
Okay, so for an individual person, with responsibilities every day, especially for the edgelings who are really the ones who keep organizations driving forward and have visions for their organizations, what's your advice to them?
I would say, well, it's 3 things. One is, keep your eyes on the horizon, see what's going on out there, and as quickly as it makes sense, try to take these tools and practices into your organization. Make it happen. I think one of the tips from one of the panels yesterday is really helpful, which is don't fiddle around, go big. These are the kinds of things that have to be sort of accommodated whole cloth. But I don't expect that, honestly. I think what we'll have is a lot of resistance. I was on a lecture tour for the American Marketing Association for a while, talking about social media, and I finally quit, even though I had really great ratings from my talks, because I was tired of talking to audiences of people who were there to figure out how to do as little as possible. It was extremely annoying to me, and I expect we'll see the same thing. We're going to have to wait for a generation of people who take these kinds of technologies and the cultural impacts of them, the cultural matrix that they impose. People that take that as a matter of course. When they're moving into the workforce, they just won't accept, the kind of management thinking that, would have typified, let's say, the last 10 years. They just won't go for it. And of course, by that time, a lot of the baby boomers will have retired or been pushed out or whatever. And at that point, things will have changed. We're going to, as Ray Lane will say, we'll have to wait for a generation of people to die off before it really happens.
Would you like to make that your last word, or is there anything else you'd like to add?
Going to have to die off. My last word is done.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.